video this week, really. I don't think I made any videos this week. Two, I was kind of busy, and secondly, I didn't have anything to talk about. And I was also preparing for today, in spiritual sense. It's 20 years now since the 9/11 events in New York and Washington. And you really need that 20 years to actually comprehend things looking back on them. That's why the Masons have a thing called the score, the 20 score, a score years, 20 years. And you can score off what you've learned and what you've attained. And the world is a vastly different place today than it was in 9/11 2001. Now, as I had said many times, I missed the original broadcast. I was working in a basement of a building. That's my first day on the job, actually. And I had to go to the records department. And I was reading corporate training manuals and things like that. I had no computer, hadn't been hooked up yet, had no TV, no radio, and I only had a Nokia Basic mobile phone. So I did nothing, except at lunchtime someone had said a plane had crashed into the Twin Towers. But I didn't know anybody in the office, so there was no one to have conversations with. I just got there. So I just heard someone say in passing. So I just thought it was like an aviation accident. I was like, geez, that's horrible. And I had no idea until I came out at 5:30 and that the towers had collapsed, and there was just this horrific attack, an event. And so I'll never forget the look on people's faces when I came out in the central Dublin and looked around at them. It was just unbelievable, the looks on their faces. And I knew right then the world was never going to be the same again. Now, at the time, I went with the first reports. I went with probably a very highly planned terrorist attack, and not, understandably, because there had been very high profile terrorist attacks by Al Qaeda in Dar es Salaam in Africa and a few other places where there's a huge loss of life as well. And so these people were serious and knew what they were doing, very heavily funded. So I just said, but then one immediate thing immediately set my alarm bells off was when they said they found the passport of one of the hijackers. Here we're watching videos of two planes hitting buildings and they disintegrating. Now, I had not been long back from New York, so I called up some people that had talked to them. One heard the first plane flying towards the North Tower, was cycling to work that morning down to Chelsea, and didn't see the plane hit or strike, but heard the jet coming in real low over Manhattan from the north. And a few people had actually seen a strike on the second tower, or had seen an explosion around it, or saw the plane coming in. So those of you who say there was no planes, you're wrong. I know people who saw planes and hitting the towers. Now, and then they said weird things. It was like really weird. Like after the attack happened, they just went back to their neighborhoods and life was going on like nothing had happened. It was like really strange. But anyway, when they said they found the passport of one of the hijackers that had survived this inferno, it's basically a blast furnace, 80 stories up and two buildings. Impossible, the kind that that fireball, that explosion would noise a passport. Those people inside those planes would have been incinerated right then, and then within the building. Now, as it happened, the company I worked in for at the time, Marshall McLennan, was the first company. Their head offices was hit in the first attack, and we lost something like 160 staff in the first plane hit. And the next day at work, they were saying things like, it looks like they all got out because there's so much confusion. And then there was corporate emails coming through, and then they said, no, it looks, by the end of the day, they were saying, it looks like the worst has happened, guys. And so, like, there was the first day. Now, it gets even weirder, guys. I was working on corporate communications. That was my job. I was brought in for corporate communications. And the workload of all the New York in the North Tower was handed to different offices around the world, and so I picked up the communications department from the New York office, and I've I had already done about 8 or 9 years in corporate graphic design before that. I know what corporate graphic design looks like and how it's presented. Generally, very bright colors. Blue is a dominant, pale blue, bright blues, things that are fresh, colors like that, pale oranges, complementary colors. And a lot of work goes into corporate color palettes. Well, these people who were all killed in the first plane hitting the North Tower were creating a color palette where all the slides were black. And all the documents were in black. And I've never seen in my life a corporate color palette based on black and grey. And there was only one color involved in it, and that was deep red. And the person I was working with in the office at the time, we both looked at, when we were opening up the Apple Mac files on their work, both said the same thing. The poor fuckers knew they were going to die somehow. And they had a subconscious thing. And that's how they knew. That's why they're doing the stuff all in black. Totally, and out of corporate standards as well. We were developing a new palette. And it was just like, apparently both of us, they knew they were going to die. Black and red. Mostly black and one red color and greys. So that was the first inkling of a supernatural kind of thing relating to it. And then there was the faces that people kept seeing, in devil faces kept seeing in the smoke rising out of buildings. Well, that was the mind looking for simulacrums to tell. You're being warned by the subconscious mind that something wicked is what you're seeing now is not all it is. Now, and when your mind finds these faces in the smoke, it's your subconscious mind telling you there's something far wicked going on here. So then, as the weeks and days progressed, like everyone else with a brain, I was trying to understand how Saddam Hussein was suddenly involved. And it was this is like I couldn't, like, what? Suddenly Saddam Hussein is the one involved in the war against Iraq. So I knew this was all bollocks. There was something going on here. But to see the mainstream media blaming Iraq, but there was still a lot of dissent in the mainstream media. They were saying, there was lots of journalists and papers who wrote, Iraq didn't do it. In fact, Al-Qaeda wants to kill Saddam Hussein. They want him dead. And and he's at war with them. So why would he be helping them attack the towers? And then I found out that the Bin Laden family had been secretly smuggled out of the United States, literally while the attack was happening, and to the Saudi, to the house of Saud, where they came from. Then when I found that all the nationalities of all the hijackers, what they were, I was like, fuck. The Saudis did it. The Saudis did it. And because how I knew this was because I'd already been reading up on the relationship between the Bush family and the House of Saud, which is practically incestuous. And there's numerous photographs of the Bushes walking around holding hands with them and stuff like that. And George Bush Sr. going, videos of him going, we're among our best friends in the world, and all these fellas who chop women's heads off because they leave their husbands and stuff like that, or don't want to go to arranged marriages. And I knew right then there was by that time I was like, there's something not right here. Now, whether I had bought into the whole conspiracy thing, I don't know. I still haven't really. I do believe that the Saudis did it. There's no doubt about that in my mind now. You can talk about the dancing Israelis. I don't think there's anything to relate them to it. I think they may have known about it. Everyone knew about it. I mean, everyone knew it was coming. I mean, Gore Vidal was on the radio not long afterwards, and he was saying the Japanese told them, the British knew, the South Africans knew, the Israelis knew, and they'd all told the Bush government that it was coming, and it was ignored. It was ignored because they had invested interest in ignoring it. And then it turns out that the Senate hearings, Condoleezza Rice turns around and says something like, a document arrived a few months before a document arrived on her desk, and on the title of the title of the document was U.S. under imminent attack by commercial airliners being used as missiles. Everyone knew it was coming. Everyone, literally everyone, knew it was coming. So that's why the Israelis were there. They were there to look at it to see. They obviously they were spooks. I don't think they were in on it. I think, and they were dancing. They were like delighted because that meant more money for Israel, and weapons and stuff like that. They were just scumbags. But and even the Israelis just called them scumbags as well. That's how they're portrayed. The Israeli media are portrayed as scumbags too, and so then I did. That's to me is to this day the Saudis did it. See no other proof, and elements within the neocons, not necessarily George Bush, but elements within that neocon group did turn a blind eye. Turned a blind eye to it, and that's really it. But what should have been a standard terrorist attack that was picked up on TV changed reality. I mean, I know people telling me stories that they would just be sitting there watching TV, and there was all kinds of confusion. Oh, then Building 7 as well. It was that was being the psychiatric gymnastics on that one that the bunkers tried to use. I mean, it's clearly behind a woman on the BBC when she says the building has fallen and it's still standing. So that building was taken out somehow. I suspect by a missile. That's probably because I've seen similar missiles used in Gaza by the Israelis, and that's exactly how they work in tall buildings. They penetrate into the basement and they shatter all the foundations, and the whole thing comes straight down like that. I think there's only one shot of it coming down, and they reckon the missile came from the other side. You didn't see it. Why they took it down? Did they believe it was going to fall and needed to be taken down before it fell on the other side and caused more damage? I don't know. Were they hiding a secret? I don't know. All I know is that thing was definitely a controlled explosion. Regarding the two other towers, I think the planes could have done it, but then again, I'm not an expert. I can't tell for sure. Those skyscrapers, the twin towers, are like nothing else on earth. They were a very unique design. And when people say, where would all the rubble go? If you can actually see photographs, and you can practically see through these buildings. They were literally glass and steel. There was very little. They weren't built of massive concrete piles and girders. They were literally steel beams, exoskeleton of steel beams and glass and very thin partition walls. They were very light, small buildings, so that's quite possible too. But I mean, I'm not an expert. I'm just saying that's what it seems. I don't care. I don't even care about it, to be honest with you. What I care about and I think a lot of these kind of conspiratorial things that shot up in the aftermath were really kind of dark in their own way, and they distracted from what was really going on, where the real attack had happened in the human consciousness. People were watching this thing going, it was a horror enough watching the buildings on fire and then another plane hitting. That was bad enough, people at home watching this or at work. And then, you had cameras all over the place. And then the camera would zoom in on two people standing by a ledge, and then they'd all jump together. And people would not expect it, because, the guy in the helicopter didn't expect it. He was filming it. And the live feed, literally, it was a live snuff movie. There's numerous things that were shown that day that have never been seen again, or you can't find them on the regular web. There was one of a man trying to climb down the outside of the building on the corner, and he gets down about 2 stories, and then he starts sliding and can't stop himself sliding. And there's like one shot of a horrific video of people at the window in the World's Restaurant, and they're all like gasping for air, and there's dozens of them. And they told us at the time that 20,000-30,000 could have died, and it seemed plausible. They just didn't know. But in the end, it was just I think it was just around 3,000. And a lot of them were, unfortunately, firemen and things like that. And 3,000 is still a horror show. But it was a visual horror more than anything else as well. I mean, not to degrade the families who lost their relatives. But I knew it people seeing this live snuff movie had affected humans. And when it started to come out, there was all kinds of foreshadowing. Lots of people had predicted it. A child in Brooklyn pointed at towers and said they're not going to be there tomorrow when he was in school. And there was like endless foreshadowing in all kinds of art and media. And people try to make out, oh, it's predictive programming. It's not. It's artists have an ability to see the future and they and put it into their art. That was really what did it for me. This thing has rattled human consciousness. And this is the beginning of the gaslighting that was accepted. Like, the initial gaslighting was they found this passport. It had somehow survived this inferno. This is like a blast furnace, 80 floors up, a steel mill. That survived a paper and card passport. I knew that at the beginning was bullshit. It's still bullshit. And that was the initial gaslighting, and then you had the Building 7. Oh, it didn't. No, that you don't understand. You're not looking at that news. No. She said the building was down. It was right behind her, so somebody knew that building was coming down. Then got that gaslighting. Al Qaeda did it, yeah, but it's Saddam Hussein's fault. What? That was another part of the gaslighting. Then the weapons of mass destruction. We saw these scumbag neocons for what they really were. And also the lack of complete opposition from the other side. The so-called left doing nothing about it and pointing out. And then you had like that massive march against the Gulf War invasion in London. And there was some of the estimates of something like 4 million people were at that. And Tony Blair and the rest completely ignored it. That's why you're wasting your time there marching if they ignored that. And then the conspiracies all just became the thing. There was, I have to say, 2006, 7, 8, the conspiracy started flying in on the whole thing. It was like it needed the 7 years or something to like really gestate the conspiracies. And I have to say, of all the conspiracy stuff I'd watched, I'd learned nothing new to change my mind. My attitude was, before I watched all these conspiracy videos, was it was the Saudis who did it. It was an excuse to steal Saddam Hussein's oil, and elements within the US government, within the neocons, shall we say, facilitated it, allowed it to happen. Not necessarily the Bushes, though. I'm not convinced that they knew directly. It was a magic ritual, absolutely. It was the Samson ritual. It was the destruction of the 2 columns to destroy the old world. And they did. And that's what I've been telling people all this week, to post images of the Twin Towers standing and looking beautiful or being constructed. Because there's a power, we can undo that hex in our own lives, not in the world, but in our own lives we can undo those hexes. So, I mean, today will be there'll be a very solemn, strange energy today, and I'm feeling it already. There's a powerful energy. And this is the one opening we'll probably get. Today you'll see lots of synchronicities. Relating to it, like they're going to be everywhere. People you talk to, things, books you see in windows, that seem to be unconnected, but they'll have something to do with it. And basically, 9/11 led to the police state we live in today. But it also had a good side to it. A good thing came out of it, and that was what you would call the alternative scene. For the first time, we have the alternative media, alternative news, alternative thinkers, all kinds of stuff like that is massive now, and that was because of 9/11. That's what happened. Now, we're back here again. It's almost like 9/11 was 2001, 2001, was the first part of the shockwave. And the end of the shockwave, where it's catched, is now the Rona. And in between, human consciousness has been fundamentally altered. Reality has been changed. It's not the same anymore. If you had told people back in 2000 and the year 2000, September 10th, 2001, that the Pentagon admit that UFOs are real and they're on the news, and they wouldn't have believed them. Lots of things they wouldn't have believed. And the massive planetary changes happening. You'd have told Irish people that there had been a vaccine digital passport, apartheid in this country, they would have laughed at you. They never allowed that to happen. Yeah, here we are. Let's take this 20th anniversary as a closing rite, to close that gate, and that's how I'm been. That's going to be how I'm going to be all day today, and right into this evening. Very solemn, very, very introspective. Constantly thinking about the towers before they went up, because I spent years living in New York, and let's bury the dead in a dignified way, not in a propaganda way, and close that gate, and couple the closing of that gate to the Rona in its ending cycle. It is happening. Denmark has just stopped all restrictions. It's slowly happening. I know some places have gone nuts, but it's still nuts. But generally all over the world it's opening up. And the mistakes that we made back then, thinking that when it happened and when it dawned on you that there were certain individuals who were deliberate that should have been arrested, never got arrested, we now know how the game is completely rigged. So now the attitude is a parallel society. That, you can have your 9/11s, you can have your Ronas, but it's not going to happen to us anymore. So, leave some comments down below. I'll be interested to know how you feel about 20 years on, if you experienced it like I did or not, and what it means psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and look after yourselves, okay? Because it's when you see something like that, when you see something like that as was happening, you realize how dangerous this world is, and every day you live is a gift. Always remember that. And George Bush Jr. can paint all the paintings he wants of dogs and of US veterans, or he'll never live down the fact of that, sitting in that classroom when those kids were going, kite or kit or whatever it was, plane hit steel, and my pet upside down. It was just, come on. It was just bizarre on every level. And then the guy whispers in his ear, and he looks like he's more being programmed as a Manchurian. Then he vanishes for days, and then shows up declaring war on Saddam Hussein. It's just, it's amazing to me that the same people who say, there's people out there I can talk them through the whole 9/11 thing. The Saudis did it. Oh yeah, and they blame Bin Laden. Yeah. And then they attacked Iraq, and they go, oh, I know, it's such bullshit, and the weapons of mass destruction. You turn around to those same people and say, this is a scamdemic. What are you talking about? The government wouldn't tell us, wouldn't lie to us this time. Look after yourselves.